Part 1. An unusual dawn. The dawn in the outskirts of Vermont usually arrives slowly. The light does not flare up all at once, but quietly creeps across the ground like a thin mist, weaving through the nearly bare maple trees. On such an early morning, in the fragile silence of still sleeping rooftops, James Parker opened the front door holding a steaming cup of coffee, unaware that just a second later, his world would change forever. The red fox sat right in the middle of his driveway, motionless like a statue tinged with flame. The sun had not yet climbed over the hill behind the town, so its form blurred in the ashy gray mist. Only its eyes were clear, jet black, shining with an eerie intelligence, and something like waiting. It did not fear, it did not run, it did not growl. It simply sat there, its front paws neatly tucked under it as if it had long been familiar with that paved path. James frowned. Foxes rarely approach humans, especially during the day, but what truly stopped his heart was not its unexpected presence, but the object clutched in its mouth, a long strip of metal, glinting faintly as the first light grazing it, streaked with dried reddish-brown patches, the color of rust or of blood. Mockingly, at the top was a small circle where a keyring must have once been attached. James took a step forward, his instincts compelling him to take a closer look. The fox remained still, gently placing the object on the stone ground and stepping back. A breeze passed. The yellow maple leaf fell quietly, landing beside that metal object. A worn, old-fashioned key, the kind used for wooden chests or basement doors. James had not seen anything like it in nearly a decade. A silence stretched that felt endless. Then, as though its mission was complete, the fox turned and dashed into the fog, its fiery form vanishing behind the roadside bushes. Not a sound, not a trace. James stood stunned, the coffee cup now cold in his hand. In his throat rose a strange sensation, less fear, more a heavy unease, a vague hunch, as though someone had just whispered his name from a long-buried memory. He bent down and, with trembling fingers, picked up the key. Its weight was terrifyingly familiar. A memory buried 8 years ago suddenly surfaced. He felt as though he was touching more than a key. It was a door opener not just to a room, but to the past. A question sounded in his mind, clear and painful like a blade. Why is it here, and why bring this? Part 2. A call from the past. James Parker was not a man prone to believing in omens. He was a construction engineer, all logic and precision, living by blueprints and numbers exact to the millimeter. But that morning, holding the key in his hand, his world slipped into a misty haze of the past. The key could not be mistaken. It was the key that had once been attached to the oak chest his mother had kept for years, holding childhood mementos of the two siblings. And the last time he had seen it was the last time he had seen Emily. Emily, his little sister with chestnut-curled hair and gray eyes like a winter sky. She had vanished 8 years ago, on a cold October afternoon, after asking to go play near the edge of the woods. The family searched for months. The police scoured the town with tracking dogs, drones, volunteers, but found nothing. No trace, no evidence, as though Emily had dissolved into thin air. James never forgave himself. He should have gone with her that day, but he had been absorbed in a design that needed submitting urgently. When his mother called upstairs, he replied offhandedly, "She's old enough, Mom. I'm sure she'll be fine going out on her own for a bit." One bit stretched into forever. He told himself he had to learn to let go, but the emptiness never left him. Every morning, when dawn's light poured through the window, there was for a moment a flash of forgetting that Emily was gone, that she was no longer there, no longer running hand in hand with him, no longer calling, "Big brother James, look how beautiful this butterfly is." And now, in his hand, was the key that had disappeared with her. James walked slowly toward the porch, his heart weighed down. He held the key in his palm, studying every scratch and worn spot. There was no mistaking it. It was exactly that key. Everything inside him screamed that this could not be coincidence. Then he noticed something, a small detail almost overlooked. Wrapped around the shaft of the key, loosely wound like a tangled thread, was a scrap of fabric. He lifted it into the light. Old, frayed, but the pattern was faintly visible, tiny floral dots on pale blue cloth. The dress. Emily loved that dress. Their mother had sewn it by hand, with a white lace trim and a small pocket at the side. James remembered clearly it was the dress she had been wearing the day she disappeared. A chill ran down his spine. No doubt remained, not a child's plaything recently dropped, not a random trinket lost by someone. The thing the fox brought was from his past, from a place nobody should remember. James sat down hard on the step. Old images flooded in like a torrent. Her laughter in the garden, tiny footsteps stomping up the attic stairs, her soft singing at dusk. He closed his eyes and tears streamed down before he could stop them. Who, or what, was trying to reach him through that key? Was it a cruel joke? But who, and how had they found things lost nearly a decade ago? Or was it, as part of him always wanted to believe, a sign, a message, a slender thread leading him back? James stood, clutching the key in the fabric, and headed inside. He rifled through everything: old photos, investigation files, police notes, even the dusty oak chest now lying unused in the basement. The padlock was rusted, but its shape matched the key exactly. He inserted the key and turned it gently. Click, the lock opened, eerily smooth. Inside, everything remained just as it had been. Old toys, his mother's necklace, his father's carved wooden knife, and a yellowed photograph, the two siblings embracing under a maple tree, smiling brightly amid an autumn blaze. James could not sleep at night. He sat by the window, eyes fixed on the driveway, as if waiting for the fox's return. And when the clock struck 4:58 in the morning, in the mist even thicker than before, it returned. Quietly, slowly, like an unnamed spirit, it stepped out from the forest's edge behind the house, bearing this small object glinting silver under the waning moon. James did not feel fear. His heart pounded as he stepped outside into the biting cold of dawn. The fox stood waiting, and this time, what it brought was a photograph. A small, black and white picture, blurred, but in it was Emily's face, smiling, holding a cloth butterfly. Behind her, charred tree trunks and a cracked stone wall were faintly visible. James collapsed, hands clutching his head, unable to believe what he was seeing. The soul of the past had never truly left, and perhaps a thread, fragile but unbroken, still pulled him toward where the story remained unfinished. Part 3. Footsteps into the mist. The next day, James woke well before dawn. He didn't need an alarm clock. His waiting heart awakened him even before the first light, and as though following a mysterious ritual, the fox arrived again. This time, it carried a torn scrap of paper, as if hastily ripped from a notebook. Ink had smudged across it, and in handwriting both shaky and familiar were the words, "James, if you see this, I am still here." James gasped, breathless. He recognized that handwriting. It belonged to Emily. During their evenings doing homework, she always tilted her letters slightly, with rounded, bubbly strokes. There was no mistaking it. He fought to keep his mind from drifting into nostalgic delirium, fought to keep his shaking hands steady as he picked up the scrap. The fox watched him, not leaving immediately as before. Its gaze seemed to urge him, an invitation, a challenge. Then it turned and silently trotted across the dew-wet grass, leaving behind faint, blurred footprints on the soft ground. James did what he had failed to do 8 years before. He followed. Through the rotting white fence, down the gravel pathway to the back garden, the fox slipped through dense shrubs toward the forest. The very forest sealed off after that mysterious fire. Signs had warned, danger, do not enter, but James no longer cared about rules. What he sought was the truth. For 3 consecutive days, the fox returned, each time bringing a new piece. On the second day, it delivered a butterfly-shaped keychain, its paint chipping but the design intact. Their mother had bought it at a fair for Emily, who had been obsessed with butterflies. Emily's room walls had been plastered with butterfly drawings. The last time James saw that keychain, Emily had hung it on her little purple backpack. On the third day, the fox carried nothing. Instead, it waited, then led the way. James was no longer leading. He was merely following. Tiny, crisp footprints formed a cleared trail through the damp soil, weaving among trees and occasionally disappearing into deep hollows he'd never explored. Yet the trail's direction wasn't random. It had logic, structure, sudden turns, stops where faint claw marks scored tree trunks, odd arrangements of stones, all whispering, Continue. Do not stop. Night brought no sleep. Strange sounds echoed in his mind. Not the forest's night chorus, but something more distant, metal tapping softly and regularly, like a hammer against a steel pipe. Occasionally, a faint hiss, like a breath trapped beneath the earth. Not wind, not insects, something deeper, colder. He began to record everything. The fox's gifts, its path, the symbols on rock faces, the timing of its appearances. Slowly, he realized they formed a map, not drawn on paper, but a map of memory, locations, objects, sounds, everything connected to Emily. Once, deep in the gloom of the forest, he spotted a mossy boulder etched with a faint name, E. Parker. A prank, a hallucination, or part of the labyrinth the fox was guiding him through. He began to doubt his own sanity. Was he still in his right mind? Or were memories and longing weaving illusions? But each time doubt surfaced, he saw the fox's eyes. That look wasn't illusory. It had purpose, awareness, something almost human. One late afternoon, when mist thickened like a silver curtain, James followed the fox to a clearing deep in the woods. The ground was fresh turned, as though someone had dug up and hastily refilled it. A charred tree stump lay askew, struck by lightning or something far worse. The fox sat there, unmoving, mission fulfilled. James looked around. Then, for the first time, he noticed it. A narrow path veered off from that spot, nearly hidden by vines and decaying leaves. He cleared the way and followed it. Up a gentle incline, the wind whispered. Time seemed to slow. In that moment, he felt something waiting. Not the past, not memory, but a truth, alive, breathing, close enough to touch. The fox lifted its head. From somewhere below came a faint, nearly imperceptible sound that chilled James to his core. Clack, clack, clack. Metal, echoing from deep within the earth. He didn't know how long he stood there. When he looked again, the fox was gone, but he knew it would come back tomorrow, to lead him deeper, to a place where questions could no longer hide. Part 4. The Truth Beneath the Earth. The next morning dawned without sun. Leaden clouds hung low over the tree canopy, as though the sky itself hesitated, unwilling to witness what was to come. James stepped outside wearing a small backpack and a tucked high-collared jacket. Flashlight in hand, he had made a decision. Today, he would go all the way. Just as he expected, the fox waited at the forest edge. No object in its mouth, no inspecting gaze, only silence, deep and companionable. James followed without a word. The trail that day took him down a steeper, denser path than before. Dry leaves rustled beneath his feet. Icy gusts brushed his neck like invisible fingers. The deeper he went, the quieter the forest. No bird song, no scampering squirrels, only James's heavy breaths and the fox's soft steps. They stopped before a moss-covered stone wall, nearly blending with the terrain. Without the fox's presence, James would have overlooked it entirely. But now he saw a narrow gap, choked by vines and decay. He knelt, brushing away the cover. It was an old, partially buried entrance, frame cracked, debris and fallen rock piled against it. Scourge marks stained the stone, as if from an explosion. The fox sat, motionless, as though its task had ended. James knelt, clearing the tunnel's mouth. He switched on his flashlight and shone it inside. A narrow, low passage sloped downward, light swallowed by eternal darkness below. His heart pounded, not with fear, but with hope. He looked at the fox. Its eyes were deep, reflecting memory and destiny alike. Whispering almost involuntarily, he said, "Thank you, friend." Then he entered. The tunnel was cold like the earth itself. The scent of damp decay mingled with old blaze smoke. Charred streaks stained the stone walls, cracks rayed through them, evidence of immense pressure. James crawled slowly, each inch a test of courage, insanity. After nearly 10 minutes, he reached a small chamber, stone-walled, low-ceilinged, just enough room to stand. In one corner, a broken wooden chair, a tattered mattress. The right wall bore hand-scratched markings, tally lines piled in rows. James trembled. Someone had lived here. He swung his light left, then felt his heart freeze. Charcoal drawings lined the wall, butterflies, trees, a little house, a face, James's face, drawn over and over. Beneath it, scrawled, "I remember." He didn't need further proof. Emily had been here. He dropped to his knees, fingertips tracing the charcoal. Tears fell unbidden. She wasn't dead, not lost, not taken. She had been trapped beneath the very woods their family had walked 100 times, yet never seen. Then, in a rocky alcove, he found it. A small cloth-covered notebook, nearly disintegrated. He opened it. The first page, in Emily's hand. If someone finds this notebook, I am Emily Parker. I'm trapped here. Some foxes are helping me survive. I don't know why, but they care for me like part of the pack. James's hand shook as he turned the pages. A journal, uneven in writing, dates sometimes off, but enough to show she'd lived in this chamber for nearly 2 years after the fire. Wounded, unable to leave, no one heard her cries. When rain came, the tunnel flooded, but the foxes, somehow, brought food, dry leaves, provided warmth. Part 5. The Eyes of Farewell. Emily slept for the first 14 hours after being rescued from the underground chamber. Doctors said she was severely exhausted, dehydrated, malnourished for years, and had clearly lived in an enclosed environment for a long time. But miraculously, there was no serious internal damage, no broken bones, and no severe infections, an outcome nearly impossible under such conditions. She was alive. That was the truth James had to keep repeating in his mind. She was alive. He sat by her hospital bed, holding her hand, watching each breath, every faint movement, every time she furrowed her brows in sleep. He flinched. He was terrified of losing her again. On the third day, Emily woke up. Her gray eyes opened, drifting across the room before settling on James. A faint, fragile smile appeared on her lips. "I'm still here, aren't I?" she whispered, her voice barely a breath. James nodded, unable to speak. He squeezed her hand, unable to hold back the tears. She spoke, in broken fragments, in faded memories, in a faraway gaze, of the days after the fire. She did not remember how she had ended up in the chamber. Only that she woke up, injured and trapped. No one came, no sound, except rain and wind. And then, the foxes came. They were not afraid of her. They did not run when they saw her. The largest one, redder than fire, with eyes like sunset, as she described it, often led the others. It brought her forest mice, wild berries, dry straw. Once, when she had a high fever, she woke to find it curled beside her, as if warming her with its breath. They never spoke, never signaled, but there was something understanding. James asked why she had not left once she had recovered. Emily lowered her eyes, gently rubbing the butterfly keychain James had returned to her. "I do not know. Maybe I was afraid. Afraid to return to a world where no one was waiting. Afraid no one would believe. Only when I saw the fox bringing things from my memories did I know someone was still looking for me." James could not answer, because that was the truth. If it had not been for the fox, everything would have ended. When Emily was discharged, James brought her back to the old house, where all the memories began. They did not say much. They simply walked through the yard, once filled with laughter and running feet. The late summer breeze brushed gently, golden sunlight touching leaves already beginning to change. James stood at the edge of the driveway, right where he had first seen the fox that morning. He let out a breath, like a silent call. Nothing appeared, until the light began to fade. At the edge of the forest, as quiet as a ghost, the red fox appeared, one final time. It carried nothing. It did not come close. It only stood there, half hidden in the brush. James felt his heart beat slow. Emily saw it too. She said nothing, just stepped beside him, eyes glistening. 3 gazes met, for a few eternal seconds. A breeze stirred, lifting a few fallen leaves. The fox lifted its head, then turned and vanished into the mist like smoke. On the damp grass, only one thing remained, a butterfly keychain, identical to the first, but brand new, as if a piece of memory had been returned, whole. James picked it up without a word. Emily whispered, "How did it know the way, James? And why did it choose you?" James gave no answer, because some questions are not meant to be answered. They are only meant to be asked and remembered. Part 6. A connection beyond species. It did not take long for word to spread in the small town where James and Emily lived. The press picked up the story. Rumors flew. Some doubted, some believed a miracle had taken place. But James did not need anyone's belief, because he had seen the miracle with his own eyes. Not in the light, but in the mist. Not among people, but in the eyes of a wild creature. A fox, an animal the world called instinct-driven, untamed, and beyond human understanding. But to James, it had proven the opposite. In the darkest days of Emily's life, it was the foxes, those silent, speechless creatures, who had done what no one expected, cared, protected, and preserved a fragile life from being forgotten. Not with words, but with actions. Not for any clear reason, but simply because they did. And perhaps that was the miracle itself. James used to think life only existed within the bounds of human understanding. But one day, he realized empathy, when real, does not need to come from the same species. It does not need a shared language. All it needs is a look, a gesture, a soul willing to listen. He never saw the red fox again. It never returned, perhaps knowing its mission was complete. But each morning, as dawn poured through the window, James would sometimes see its image shimmering in the mist, a faint shadow at the forest's edge. With eyes he would never forget, Emily began to paint again. She recreated each memory in color, from the cold stone chamber to the foxes that surrounded her each night. In one large painting, she depicted the leading fox, tall, slender, with eyes heavy with the forest's memory. Around its neck, she painted a small scarf, an unspoken thank you from a human heart to a nameless creature. She titled the painting, "The Silent Friend." James hung it above the fireplace in the living room. Everyone who visited paused a little longer in front of it. Eventually, when someone asked James, "Do you think the fox knew what it was doing?" he only smiled and replied, "I'm not sure we need to understand. Some things we just need to feel." The story ended not like a fairy tale. No medals, no honors, no celebrations. Just a girl who survived, a brother who found his family again, and a quiet reminder of something simple, yet profound, that life, sometimes, is saved not by grand acts, but by a gaze, a footprint, and a heart that needs no words. At the forest's edge, where the mist still rises each morning, people say they sometimes glimpse a red fox, standing still as stone, gazing toward the house where two siblings once lost, found each other again, through a thread that crossed every boundary. Sometimes, salvation comes from where we least expect it, from lives that once seemed far away. Emily called them silent friends. One fox always led, larger and smarter, with reddish-brown eyes. It had bitten her sleeve to drag her out of mud, stayed beside her when she had a fever. James collapsed, head in hands. It was that fox. It had kept his sister alive. But another question grew. If she had been here, why did no one find her? And where was she now? He barely thought the words when a sound echoed. Crash! A chunk of rock dislodged above. The chamber shook. Water seeped through cracks. It was raining above. The tunnel was about to collapse. James leapt up, calling, "Emily, Emily." No answer. He raced toward the entrance, intent to climb out, but then he heard it. A weak, trembling breath from behind a jagged crack in the stone wall. He smashed at it with his hands and shoulder. A chunk gave way. Behind it lay a hollow. Inside was a small, frail figure wrapped in tattered shawls, long tangled hair, eyes half open. Emily. She was alive. He scooped her into his arms. She could only whisper, "I knew you would come." He cried out, half joy, half despair, but there was no time. Water rushed in, the ceiling cracked. He carried Emily on his back, retracing each crawl, life trembling with every step. The entrance came into view. He crawled out and pulled her to safety just as the tunnel collapsed behind them with a thunderous roar. Echoing through the forest, James collapsed on the wet ground. Holding her, rain poured down like a baptism. Both of them wept, pain, joy, and loss all mixing together. When he looked up, the fox was gone. Only the butterfly keychain lay placed neatly on a rain-slick rock.